Dwayne Patterson in for Hugh Hewitt today. Hugh is in Georgia, in Savannah, giving a speech for the Job Creators Network, having a big confab down there, and he's part of it and giving a speech. And lots of people there, Brian Kemp and all sorts of great people are holding court down there, and Hugh is definitely one of them. And from little reports I saw online, he's already making all sorts of fun things public. But I'm here on a day when there's all sorts of fun news. There's serious stuff in the news that we will talk about. But, oh, my gracious, are there some fun things that we need to talk about and seize and pounce, I guess it would be the right expression to use. He will be back on Monday. He'll actually be back in hour 3 as Dr. Matt Spalding fills in for Larry Arnn on the Hillsdale Dialogue. We're approaching the anniversary of Lexington and Concord in the run-up to the Revolutionary War, and so they have a Hillsdale Dialogue all set up for hour 3. Joining us today is Matt Continetti of AEI and Commentary Magazine, Ben Domenech of The Spectator and Fox News, and Jim Garrity will be along as well of National Review. Of course, we'll have poetry by Tarzana Joe a little bit later. And I think I'm going to talk to Jim about the just absolute hypocrisy in New York Magazine this morning. In 2022, when Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman was running, he had just had a stroke and held a debate, and everybody's like, I'm not sure he can do this because he's still suffering the effects of the stroke. He couldn't form sentences. He couldn't convey the messages in his head. He had trouble articulating what he was thinking. And so that would kind of preclude whether or not you could carry out the job of being a senator, which is talking for a living and voting and networking with other senators. And New York Magazine at the time said, oh, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. In fact, you're a bad person if you think it's a problem. He's just fine. Until, of course, he supports the Jews and supports Israel and isn't real happy about the anti-Semitism on campus and is willing to at least talk and meet with Trump officials in his role as United States Senator. That's a bridge too far, says his staff, and you can read into that. Probably his wife, Giselle. And, well, now we don't think he's got the mental capacity to be senator anymore. And the Whisper campaign, by the same New York Magazine, is trying to push him out because they don't think he's up to the job anymore because of the effects of the stroke. It's interesting how that works, isn't it? He doesn't align with the radical nature of the Democratic Party today. And, my gracious, he's got to go. Now, mind you, the New York Magazine did not have anything really substantive to say about the decline we saw from Joe Biden for 4 years. But no, John Fetterman, bridge too far. We gotta move off of that. I got to play a clip from Jake Tapper on CNN last night. He's talking to Brandon Gill, a great young congressman. I think he's out of Colorado. No, he's Texas, actually. I think he's a Texas congressman. Could be mistaken. But he's talking to Brandon Gill after Donald Trump announced he's yanking funding by way of executive order from PBS, which is highly overdue, a move that's highly overdue. I really wish that they could get that into the reconciliation bill in Congress, but I don't think they can. So it would take 60 votes, and the Democrats will never vote to get rid of PBS, so Trump just did it by way of EO. And Jake Tapper decided to make it personal. Here is what he had to say. Cut 8, please.
Speaker Harvey Johnson has said he would additionally like to cut funding for public broadcasting, PBS, which does receive some support from the federal government. It's interesting. I just have to say, on a personal level, I learned to read by watching Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and the Electric Company. That's literally how I learned to read as a kid. Why do you not think PBS is important?
Well, according to that logic, then everybody that grew up in Ohio ended up like Hugh did, so we must tax subsidize Ohio above all others because Hugh learned to read in Ohio. By that logic, I learned to drive on a manual transmission car. So I guess the government should start funding and subsidizing manual stick shifts again, I think. Harley, my millennial producer, technical producer here at the Hugh Hewitt Show, says he used to have a Walkman and used to burn music onto CDs back in the old days of, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And now he doesn't do that because everything's streaming. So I guess what we got to do is we've got to subsidize CDs for everybody, blank CDs, so you can use that medium again. You see where we're going with this? He's personalizing. Well, this is how I did it, so everybody does it. Well, you know how I learned to read? These bad boys. Harley, you have that picture of these MacGuffin readers. How many people are you out there are as old as I am, and you remember these guys? And you actually learn to read by primers, by using books to read. There was a generation of kids, 15, 20 years ago, that learned how to read with the Harry Potter books. A whole generation of kids did. But Jake Tapper's argument is, I learned how to read this way, so we must need government subsidies so that everybody else will do the same thing. Ask yourself, how many people do you know that have kids now that they learn how to read by watching Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers every day, or The Electric Company? I'll bet it's under 100. I'll bet it's under 50. I'll bet it's under 10, the number of people that actually do. That's not how kids learn to read these days. It's just not. So Jake's argument is, well, we need to subsidize it, and they have a value because it worked for me 55 years ago. Well, that's not really a very good reason at all, is it? When we come back after the break, we're going to dive into what Marco Rubio had to say on Fox News with Hannity last night, now that he is the acting national security advisor, along with 3 other portfolios, including the Secretary of State. Had some very interesting things to say. But he, on Twitter, or on X earlier today, reacted to the news of Germany. And to set this up, last night on ABC's Jimmy Kimmel, the late night show on ABC News, J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, and who is desperately trying to gin up a presidential run by racing and embracing the fever swamp on the left. Pritzker had this to say last night, cut number 19.
Well, I think everybody understands that at this point, we've got an authoritarian in office. He's essentially tearing apart the things that really matter to working families across the United States, and nobody's stopping him. And that Congress is under the control of his party. They're all paying homage to him at all times. No one's willing to break with him, even though they're
okay. That's enough.
You
can see where this is going. Trump's Hitler. Trump's a dictator. He's an authoritarian. This is. He's done this. We're living in pre-war Nazi Germany, 30s Nazi Germany right now. This is his shtick that he's trying to do. I don't know if he believes it or not, but this is his pathway to reach the fever swamp in the Democratic base. Meanwhile, over in Germany, the party in power right now is trying to make sure the party that came in second place, the AfD, or Alternative for Democracy, is one way to describe what they are. But they're a frontline political power in Germany right now. But the secret police, the spy agency in Germany, announced that we are branding the entire political party as a terrorist group and a threat, and so we're going to start surveilling them. That's what an authoritarian move is. That's what tyranny looks like. And Marco Rubio, as his Secretary of State role, put up on X, Germany just gave its spy agency new powers to surveil the opposition. That's not democracy. That's tyranny in disguise. What is truly extremist is not the popular AFD, which took second in the recent election, but rather the establishment's deadly open border immigration policies that the AFD opposes. But again, Germany is trying to snuff out and spy on. It would be like Donald Trump just announcing and having the CIA announce, as of today, we're branding the Democratic Party as extremists, and we're going to start conducting surveillance on them. You think that would go over really well? Of course that's not happening. It is in Germany, but Trump is Hitler. Trump is dictator. It's nonsense. You are going to hear phenomenal bumper music today. I'm just telling you. Goose, my favorite new band, came out with a new album last Friday. And I've been just doing nothing but listen to it in my off time. It's just a wonderful record. Everything Must Go. Illegal Aliens. Everything must go. Now, let's get to the fun stuff here. How many of you were in the panic mode over the last few weeks at the stock market? Oh, the stock market's crashing. We got a recession coming on, the tariffs, the uncertainty, all this stuff. And, whether you're going to buy the dip or sell everything off and convert to cash, all that. Well, have you seen what's been going on with the market the last couple of weeks? It's going to close again up. It's going to be the 10th day in a row, 10th trading day in a row that it's closed up. Right now, it's averaging about up a little over 500 points. It's been up as much as 6 today. It's been as low as 4.5, but it's going to be probably somewhere north of 500 when it closes. And it's within 2,000 of its all-time high. The S&P, by the way, the S&P is actually where it was when Trump announced Liberation Day and announced the tariffs. So all that hysteria, all that angst is gone. Now, why is it up today? Well, a couple reasons. One, the jobs report was pretty good, better than expectations. We added 177,000 jobs. They were only expecting 133. Lots of good underlying signs in that as well. This market report, by the way, brought to us by our friends at American Federal. AmericanFederal.com. You can call Nick Rovich or any member of his team and check out the gold price, because that's what they do, gold and precious metals. And gold right now, in fact, let's look and see what gold did. I didn't even check that out. Gold is up quite a bit today, actually. It is up about $15. And it's trading for about $32.37 right now. Is it going to go higher? Is it going to go lower because of the market improvement? That's a really good question for Nick and his team. You should call 800-221-7694. That's 800-221-7694. No nonsense, no muss, no fuss. They'll just tell you what's going on, give you some advice, and the more gold you buy, the lower the commission, and it's just a cut and dried financial transaction. AmericanFederal.com, AmericanFederal.com. So the market is rebounding quite nicely, and part of the other reason of the market's optimism today is that China may have blinked. China has apparently become a little less defiant, as Jim Garrity reported over at the Jolt this morning. And they're signaling they're willing to open up hailing frequencies on some kind of a trade deal. In fact, as an opening precursor, in the Wall Street Journal today, they're announcing that they're willing to revisit cracking down on all the precursor chemicals and ingredients that go into fentanyl. Now, this was an easy thing for them to do, and it was probably the easiest way to head off the trade thing to begin with. But they would refuse to do so. They were not serious about it. And now they seem to be wanting to crack down and quit exporting all the components that make up fentanyl that are killing so many people around the world. And if that is indeed a precursor to show good faith that they're willing to talk, maybe the tariffs may have had their desired effect and they're willing to renegotiate. Something they were not willing to do a week ago, something they were not willing to do 2 weeks ago, a month ago, a year ago. So that's what's going on there. Marco Rubio was on Hannity last night with Sean, and let's play just a little bit of what he had to say about China. Cut number, I've lost my list. What number is it, Harley? It's cut number 14.
They've been ripping off the world. And look, yes, there's efforts. You can see that, look, this is hurting the Chinese economy. People forget that the factories where all these shoes and shirts and clothing and all that stuff that comes from China, those are all Chinese jobs. When they say that the containers, that the factories are not going to be sending things to America, that means they're out of a job. This is hurting the Chinese economy badly.
They're getting squeezed. And they're reacting to that pressure differently today than they did before. And the markets are kind of taking notice of it. We'll talk about that with Matt Continetti, what he had to say about Iran, and all sorts of other fun and silly stuff in the news today. I am joined by a good friend of the program, good friend personally, and probably one of the smartest commentators in American public life today, and that's Matt Continetti of the American Enterprise Institute and also of Commentary Magazine. You can read everything he writes over either at Commentary, AEI, or online at Continetti. Hello, Matt. How are you? Good to talk to you again.
Hi, Dwayne. It's great to be here. Good to hear from you.
So there is so much serious and so much fun that we've got to work our way through. I'm just kind of go back and forth, and we'll see kind of where the conversation takes us. Let's pick up where I left off going into the break, which is Marco Rubio last night talking about China, and it looks like, if you read the Wall Street Journal this morning and reading kind of the tea leaves, it seems like China may not be doing one of those fast blinks, but it's at least a slow blink. They seem to be acting like, okay, maybe this tariff thing is going to be bad for us after all. Maybe we should start thinking about opening up hailing frequencies. What did you read that Wall Street Journal story, and what's your assessment, Matt?
Yes, I thought that Wall Street Journal story was very interesting, but it speaks to the weaknesses of export-dependent economies like China's. China's economy does not run like the American economy. The engine of the American economy, as you know, Dwayne, is consumer spending. Consumers really determine the shape of our economy and the activity of the economy. Well, in China, consumer spending is very weak. China is a totalitarian communist state. They don't let the freedom of the average consumer. There are millions upon millions of rural Chinese who still live lives of poverty. So the Chinese economy is driven by this export machine from the top down, from the top of the CCP. And while that's allowed the CCP and the People's Republic of China to strengthen over time and to become our major competitor, our major adversary in the world, it also means that the Chinese economy is highly leveraged when it comes to its export industries. And so as we've reached the state of trade war between the US and China, and President Trump exercising America's economic leverage over the Chinese export machine, yes, that machine is starting to show some kinks and starting to kind of slow down. And I think that's what we read in the Wall Street Journal, and it's why the Chinese, while still playing a tough game, still talking tough, are also signaling that they could be open to not only creating exemptions for certain imports from the United States, but also trade negotiations.
I tend to agree with you. The market seemed to have a double reaction today. It opened up fairly strong on the jobs numbers news, and again, you were kind of comparing the economies. The American economy seems to be sloughing off whatever Trump did to it with the tariffs, because the Dow's, as we're speaking, the Dow's within 2,000 of its all-time high, and the S&P is already back to where it was on Liberation Day. So the American economy seems to be, chugging right along, and the Chinese economy seems to not be doing too well right now.
Yeah, I thought it was a great jobs report for President Trump. The unemployment rate was 4.2%, so full employment economy. You had job growth above expectations. That's why the markets were performing really strong.
And more people joining the workforce. More people joining the workforce, too.
More people joining the workforce, right, which is always a good thing. And you're right to say that when Liberation Day happened, when Trump unveiled his big chart of reciprocal tariffs on every country, on uninhabited islands in the case of the penguins,
sure,
the markets went a little haywire. But now, a month afterward, I think that markets have kind of been settled, and they're encouraged by the trade progress with their allies that Treasury Secretary Bessent talks about. And so we have the prospect of continued prosperity that Trump promised. One thing, we'll have to wait. We'll have to wait to see if those shortages that the president himself discussed at the cabinet meeting this week actually arrive. It might make the markets take a different turn. But right now, I think there's no question that this economy is performing very well for the American people and for President Trump.
When we come back after the break, we're going to turn to what Marco Rubio, now the acting National Security Advisor, as well as National Archivist, as well as Secretary of State, as well as I don't know. I think he's in the Conference of Cardinals
USAID
for Pope too. Yeah, USAID. Yes, that's what he's doing too. Let's do some of the fun stuff while we're here on the podcast. So you remember this $10 billion lawsuit that Donald Trump lodged against CBS and Paramount, which ballooned up to $20 billion for election interference because of what they did with the Kamala Harris interview. You remember this, right, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so did you see the Emmy Awards? The nominations came out today, and CBS, of course, has been balking at this lawsuit, saying it's BS, it's fake, it's outrageous, it shouldn't be happening. We didn't do anything wrong. What's that? The Emmys came out? Well, we're nominated. What are we nominated for? Best editing for this specific interview, Matt Continetti.
Pretty funny. I mean, 60 Minutes is in a tailspin. Its executive producer, a longtime part of that show, left because of what he alleges to be corporate interference from the owners of 60 Minutes. This lawsuit that President Trump filed is a serious lawsuit. I mean, it's going to be taken seriously, and it's already having consequences. And then you get news like this with the Emmys rewarding CBS and 60 Minutes, and it's another sign that our kind of elite liberal cultural class, our media class, they just have no
They're
clue.
Never going to get it.
They're never going to get it. Never going to get it, even in this time where so much is heading in a more conservative direction.
Speaking of never going to get it, the Kilmar-Abrego-Garcia saga keeps unfolding, and it gets worse for the Democrats every single day. I want to play you just a quick clip of the wife of Kilmar-Abrego-Garcia, the one who filed all the court filings. We now actually have her on tape asking a judge. Harley, can you play that clip? Do you have it?
I came to fill out a protective order. I think it was in December. But I didn't show up to the court because his family washed my brain telling me that his dad was sick and not to do it. So I didn't do anything. But after that, it was I would call the police. I have a lot of police reports, and I kept trying to get to the door basement to try to open the door, and then he pushed me. So then when I was able to go outside to get a phone, I called 911 from a disconnected phone. Now they took a long time to get to the house. It was probably 20-30 minutes. So I saw a neighbor walking his dog, and I opened the door and I was like, help. And then when he heard me, he grabbed me from my hair and then he slapped me. And then the neighbor, he didn't know what to do. He didn't know what to react. I have pictures
so
of
Matt
her.
Continetti, 30 seconds till we go back to the break from the break. The Democrats are making this their hero, and it's not going to work.
Oh, I don't think it has worked. I mean, Maryland Man is not a winning cause for the Democrats. And we find this pattern Dwayne, where every time the Democrats begin to champion someone or putting someone forward as a hero of the resistance, it is inevitable that that person is exposed as a fraud or a wrongdoer. And I think we have it again in this case as well.
I didn't think we would be lucky enough for them to double down, but we seem to be that lucky, and I'll take it. Kind of going back and forth between the very serious and the just the insanely stupid stuff in the news this week. But let's get back to the serious stuff. Marco Rubio, on his interview last night with Hannity, had a couple things to say about Iran. I want to play that for Matt and get his take on it. Let's play cut number 12.
If Iran wants a peaceful civil nuclear program, meaning they want nuclear power plants, like other countries in the world have, there's a way to do it. And that is you build the reactors and you import enriched uranium to fuel those reactors. And that's how dozens of countries around the world do it. The only countries in the world that enrich uranium are the ones that have nuclear weapons. Iran they're claiming they don't want a weapon, but what they're basically asking is to be the only non-weapon country in the world that's enriching uranium. And the level at which they enrich it is really not relevant per se, because really, if you have the ability to enrich at 3.67%, it only takes a few weeks to get to 20% and then 60% and then the 80 and 90% that you need for a weapon. And so that really is the path forward here. Iran simply needs to say, we've agreed to no longer enrich. We're going to have reactors because we want nuclear energy, and we're going to import enriched uranium. This is an opportunity for them if they take it. This is the best opportunity they're going to have. President Trump is a president of peace. He doesn't want a war. He doesn't want conflict. None of us do. And there's a path forward here. But what cannot happen is to live in a world where Iran has a nuclear weapon.
Now, Matt Continetti, I'm of the take where the deal we offer Iran is duck as the B-2s are in the air. But what do you make of what Secretary Rubio said?
Well, I think what Secretary Rubio and National Security Advisor Rubio, among other things, said was very important. He's laying down a line here. He's saying any agreement with Iran will mean no enrichment. If Iran continues a nuclear program under any proposed deal, it will have to import the nuclear material. And in another part of the interview, Dwayne, we didn't air, Sean Hannity pressed Secretary Rubio and said, and what about spot inspections, including Americans? And Secretary Rubio said that any deal should include spot inspections of nuclear sites, including military facilities.
Absolutely.
Inspections that were not part of the Obama deal back in 2015. That would be part of any Trump deal. So if this is where the administration is headed with these negotiations, I think it's something that Republicans on the Hill and opponents of the Iranian nuclear program could accept. The question remains, will Iran agree to it? And I have a feeling that this might be too big of a red line for Iran, and that would, of course, would force us to think about what the United States should do next.
Yeah, I can't imagine Iran agreeing to this deal at all, but let's say hypothetically they did. The parameters with American inspections and the parameters that you described, do you think Israel would go along with it and they'd be okay with it?
You know, I think that if you have those two things, the inspections regime, no enrichment allowed whatsoever, and then you also have no sunset. That's a very important component. The Obama deal included a 10-year sunset, which means that at this point in time, Iran would have been freed from all restrictions and able to race to a bomb. So any Trump deal should have no sunset as well. You have those three things. I actually do think Israel might be able to say that they can live with this for the time being. But again, getting there with the Iranians is very hard. And I note that the proposed meeting for this weekend was postponed, and the American side is saying that they never set a date for a meeting. So we're kind of entering this period where the Iranians are really going to have to show that they are serious about no more enrichment and opening up their program to the world. And if they do that with no sunsets, then President Trump will have a big victory. If they don't agree, then President Trump has said the consequences will be severe. And I should also note, too, amidst all the hubbub in D.C. this week, President Trump imposed secondary sanctions on Iranian oil.
Yes. I was going to bring it up if you didn't. Yes.
Further restricts their program, further puts the squeeze on their economy like the other maximum pressure sanctions Trump has already imposed, and also hurts the Chinese economy because China is the largest importer of Iranian energy. So this is, Trump is pursuing a deal. There's no question about it, but he's also not letting up on maximum pressure with Iran.
Donald Trump yesterday announced that he was doing a couple things by way of executive order. One is yanking the funding of PBS, to which Jake Tapper on CNN last night had this to say, cut 8.
Speaker Johnson has said he would additionally like to cut funding for public broadcasting, PBS, which does receive some support from the federal government. It's interesting. I just have to say, on a personal level, I learned to read by watching Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and the Electric Company. That's literally how I learned to read as a kid. Why do you not think PBS is important?
Matt Continetti, did you learn to read by watching PBS? Did your kids?
I watched Sesame Street, but I'm pretty sure I learned to read the same way most people learn to read, and that is by having parents who read to you at a very
out of
young
books,
age.
Right? Yes,
out of books, and yeah, they park you in front of Sesame Street and Big Bird and The Count when they need a break. But yeah, I somehow doubt that that's how the CNN host learned how to read as well. This is a long time coming. The bias, the egregious mismanagement on the part of NPR in particular, the politicization, this is well deserved, and I hope it gets done. And these institutions will be able to continue on. They don't need government money. Why have we gotten to this point where everyone feels that they're entitled to the government money? And then when you say, well, if you want the government money, then you should acknowledge that there's 50% of the country that disagrees with you and their opinions are as valid as yours. Oh my God, it's like their hair is lit on fire and they go screaming into the streets. Cut it off, that's what I say.
Absolutely, 100% correct. And I think that's a good place to wrap it up for this week. Read everything Matt writes over at the Free Press. He's on commentary podcasts all the time, does some columns over there as well. You can, of course, link through to everything at Continetti over on X. And great reporting. Thanks a lot, Matt. We will touch base next week. I'm coming to you from the Southern Gomorrah studios. I say Southern Gomorrah because, well, California has a state capital that normally is called Sacramento. It really has turned into Sodom as of yesterday. This state, in case you want to know what not to do, you might think otherwise, that it would be a felony to contract with a minor of 16 or 17 years of age, contract them for sexual services. You might think that prostitution or retaining somebody as a sex worker for a long-term basis contractually, you might think that would be illegal and a felony and something to be looked down upon. Well, you would not be from California, because yesterday the Republicans tried to make that a felony, and the Democrats literally went to the mattresses in our state assembly, our version of House of Representatives, and literally went on the floor of the assembly and gay-shamed other gay members of the assembly who supported making paying for sex with a minor a felony, because that violates civil rights of gays or something. The Democrat Frank Gonzalez out of Los Angeles attacked Carl DeMaio, a Republican out of San Diego, who is a gay Republican in the assembly, who supports the language to make it a felony to not have to not be able to pay minors for sex, as you're a traitor to your cause. You're not the right kind of gay person because you won't stand up for civil rights, because apparently included now in California's view of being gay is the civil rights part of it, of including underage traffic. You know who actually looks at states the right way, ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. They have a book called Rich States, Poor States. RichStatesPoorStates.org is where you go to get this. And it uses a whole lot of metrics of what makes the state the best state in the union to live in and the worst state in the union. I'm telling you, this state, between what happened yesterday and the scam tram to nowhere that's now going to be built in 25 years, going from Palmdale to Gilroy for a bunch of billions of more dollars, we're falling on that list. RichStatesPoorStates.org. I don't know if we're going to hit 50, but we got to be in the mid 40s by now, just from this week alone. Go to RichStatesPoorStates.org and check out that book and support ALEC. They do very, very good work. Last hour, you heard us talk with Matt Continetti of Commentary, and for the first part of this hour, we are joined by the other half of the best 1-2 punch of punditry in all of media. That would be Ben Domenech of The Spectator and Fox News fame, and a good friend of ours. Hey, Ben, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, and thanks. I appreciate the compliment. There's plenty to talk about today, so where do you want to start?
I want to start with something that's actually brand spanking new that I just saw, and this is the judicial activism front. So, risking being held, I'm reading by Eric Doherty on X, risking being held in contempt and thrown in prison, Florida Attorney General James Uthmeyer, who is the person that replaced, what's her name, that is Moody, that's now in the Senate, right?
Yes.
Tells an activist judge to shove it after she told him to order law enforcement statewide to stand down against arresting illegals. Quote, "The judge wants me to put my stamp of approval on an order prohibiting all state law enforcement from enforcing Florida's immigration laws when no law enforcement are party to the lawsuit," Uthmeyer said, per Fox. "I'm just not going to do that. We believe the court has overstepped and lacks jurisdiction there, and I will not tell law enforcement to stop fulfilling their constitutional duties. I do not believe an AG should be held in contempt for respecting the rule of law and appropriate separation of powers. The ACLU is dead set on obstructing President Donald Trump's efforts to detain and deport illegals, and we are going to fight back. We will vigorously defend our laws and advance President Trump's agenda on illegal immigration," end quote. Ben Domenech, there you go.
Well, I think that one of the things that we need to understand about these judges who are engaged in this behavior, really all across the country, is that they're exercising authorities that they simply do not have.
Correct.
They do not have the ability to just decide willy-nilly, especially given the questions of standing and the questions regarding what the outcomes would be in these cases, to just say, you have to shut everything down. A lot of the time, I think that we assume that this is that these judges are people who are supposed to uphold the law, that they're supposed to look at things through a non-biased lens. But the truth is that these district judges are essentially political hacks. They all are people who qualified for that job and for appointment in that job by being exactly what the trial lawyers that run the Democratic Party want them to be. And that's something that's been true for a very long time. This is just what Donald Trump was always going to have to deal with when he actually applied these policies.
Yep.
The thing that I appreciate about what he's done in the first 100 days of his administration on this front is he and his team have, I think quite rightly, teed up so many different lawsuits that they want to happen. And one of the reasons they want them to happen is because they believe that they have the better of the legal argument, and that once they get to the Supreme Court, that those arguments will be won by their side. Now, I don't agree with them in every instance on that, but I do think that they're correct to sort of say, we are not going to sit around waiting for courts to deal with this in a slow manner. We're going to move quickly and spur on these cases so that they can get through the rungs of these different lawsuits and end up in the Supreme Court, or end up, being resolved at an appellate level in a quicker way than they would have otherwise. And I think that that's a wise move to do when you have a hard out at 4 years, and you don't want to be waiting around for these cases to be something that comes in on the back end. You want to get them resolved quickly if you believe that you are going to have the better of the argument. Now, that could backfire on them in some of these instances. It could be that Amy Coney Barrett, who's shown herself to be someone who can cross over along with John Roberts and be squishier on some of these questions, could decide against you in certain circumstances. And so then you end up, dealing with that. But I also think that this is a circumstance where they could be proven right on a lot of these cases in ways that are going to prove infuriating to the left, but are also, I think, going to vindicate a lot of the opinions of the conservative legal establishment, especially as it regards to a lot of the immigration authority that the president has.
I've got to think at the Supreme Court right now, the expression is quantity is a quality all of its own. And you've got to think Sam Alito has got to be building these cases, and this is another one to throw on the pile. And at some point, he's going to be hammering these things to the door of the Chief Justice, like it's the 96 Theses, saying we have got to do something.
95, isn't it? 95.
Or 95 Theses. Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. 95 Theses. But he's got to be doing this.
I'm not a Lutheran. I don't know.
but at some point, the court has got to pick one or all of these and set the ground rules for how.
They have to do this. This is not something that they can. And look, a lot of this is driven by the fact that the court for a long time, was not a place that conservatives wanted some of these questions to end up because they weren't confident about them. They didn't know what the court would rule, or they didn't have confidence in the people who were on the court and how they would rule. And right now, they're probably at the most confident that I have seen them in my time covering the conservative legal movement. And Hugh knows this as well. This is something that, I think is very much about, we like this court. We want to maximize what we can get out of this court. And we understand the reality of, if we can do that, it will set up things in the future for presidential authority, executive power, et cetera, that we believe is true. And, that includes court cases about spending. It includes court cases about immigration. It includes court cases about birthright citizenship. It includes free speech-related cases. And those are all things where they have a lot of confidence, and we'll see and see over the course of the coming year whether that confidence is placed well.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Marco Rubio, Conference of Cardinals Marco Rubio, National Archivist Marco Rubio.
Actually, Marco, that's actually a subtle thing. Maybe Marco actually would be a better candidate for Pope. I mean, he's much younger.
Yeah, but you can't be married. That's the only catch.
Yeah. I guess that's the problem.
That's a sticky detail. Yeah. Anyway, he was on Fox with our friend Hannity last night and had this to say about Ukraine. And we haven't covered this yet in the show. I want to bounce it off of you. Cut 10.
Yeah, well, let's remind everybody, this is not our war. I mean, this is a war that started under Joe Biden. For 3 years it went on. They made no effort to sort of bring it to a conclusion. And it's a war that has no military solution. In essence, Putin can't take all of Ukraine. Ukraine can't push the Russians all the way back to where they were in 2014. And so the question here is, who's the only leader in the world that can talk to both sides and hopefully bring him to a deal? And that's President Trump. And that's what he's tried to do. For 100 days, he has done efforts to bring about peace, to end the killing, to end the dying, to end the destruction. You know that Ukraine, it's going to cost hundreds of billions of dollars to rebuild that country. And so the president's tried. Look, we've gotten closer. We for the first time, we haven't known this for 3 years. We kind of can see what it would take for Ukraine to stop. We can see what it would take for the Russians to stop. The problem is those two positions are still a little far apart. And look, we're not going to give up on it in the sense that we're not going to be ready to help if we can. But there does come a point where the president has to decide how much more time at the highest levels of our government do you dedicate it, when maybe one of the two sides or both aren't really close enough, when we've got so many, I would argue, even more important issues going on around the world. Not that a war in Ukraine is not important, but I would say what's happening with China is more important in the long term for the future of the world. Obviously, Iran's nuclear ambition, all these other things that we have going on. So at some point in time, it either has to be something that can happen or we'll need to move on. That'll be a decision the president will have to make.
So, of course, in addition to that, the ink is now dry on the mineral deal with Ukraine. Does that change the calculus? What do you make of this?
Well, look, the mineral deal is a security deal, and that's the way it should be properly understood. It's meant to create an American investment and incentive in terms of protecting Ukraine, because the minerals that can come out of it are valuable to us, and there will be American businesses that are working there to acquire those minerals, and those and essentially you're getting the equivalent of a base without a base, and so that should be the context of it. There's debate about whether it's a good deal or not, but viewed in the sense of America under Donald Trump needed something in return, as opposed to just an open-ended loan or an open-ended gift of money to Ukraine, and this is the way to get it. The fact that they hammered it out is positive for Ukraine, and it's positive for America. The fact that the Russians are proving to be intransigent in this deal-making process is not a surprise to me. I'm sure it's not a surprise to Hugh, and it's one of these situations where everyone kind of knew that there was going to be more pushback from the Russian side about this than necessarily from the Ukrainian side. As much as we can talk about the belligerence of a situation regarding Zelensky in that Oval Office meeting, I think that the fact that they had that meeting at the Vatican, surrounding the death of the Pope, was something very positive. And shows that things can move in a good direction. It's just a question of how long it's going to take.
There's so much stuff that's going on. The president dropped a budget today, and a lot of people haven't really had a chance to digest it yet. Roger Wicker has digested the defense numbers, and he's not too pleased about it, but Russ Vought had pushed back on it, saying the president wants to increase defense spending to $1 trillion, a 13% increase to keep our country secure. The budget provides that level while ensuring that only Republican votes are needed by using reconciliation to secure those increases without Democrats insisting on increasing wasteful government. But it slashes and burns a lot of other spending by, $150, $200 billion. What do you make of this development, Ben?
Well, look, I think that the decision to go this route and use reconciliation was always something that there was a brief moment there where that was uncertain, and now I think, the fact is that it's been very clear to them that they needed to do it this way. What I think about it is, I care about the defense dollars not in terms of the overall amount, but in terms of what is chosen.
Amen.
And what is spent on which project.
Amen.
We have so many gigantic areas of waste within the Pentagon that are undermining to the warfighter and undermining to the long-term effort, especially vis-a-vis China. And everyone, including the most pro-defense Republicans on Capitol Hill, will tell you this. They will tell you this sometimes, in public, but more often in private. And that's a problem that I think Republicans need to understand. It needs to be solved, because when you have money that is going, you have a finite amount of money, and that money is going to projects that it should not be going to. That's how you end up in being on a back foot when it comes to things like shipbuilding and the like that are going to be so important going forward. So look, I understand that there are people, they all have bases in their states. They've all got stuff going on. They've all got VA hospitals, and they all have things that they want, covered under these different aspects of defense and defense-related spending. But the simple fact is that we need to get the house in order, and that's what matters the most. It's why I hope that they can find additional savings via the DOGE program in the Pentagon. I know that Pete Hegseth understands this, and it's one of these things that I think needs to be prioritized and prioritized rightly, not by elder statesmen, senators, but by people who actually have the experience of using the tools that we give them and that we pay for, and they know what works, what they need more of, and what they need less of.
Okay, real quick. Donald Trump announced he's yanking funding by way of executive order of PBS. Jake Tapper had this to say in the wake of it, and he made it personal. Cut number 8.
Speaker Johnson has said he would additionally like to cut funding for public broadcasting, PBS, which does receive some support from the federal government. It's interesting. I just have to say, on a personal level, I learned to read by watching Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and the Electric Company. That's literally how I learned to read as a kid. Why do you not think PBS is important?
So that's why we've got to fund it.
So okay, I just want to tell. So this is
just real quick.
That Jake Tapper has older kids. You know where you watch Sesame Street today? It's on HBO. It's on Max. That's where Sesame Street lives. Okay, you can watch it there, and we don't need to pay for it.
That's That's about as well said as you can make it. I learned to drive on a manual transmission. I want stick shifts federally subsidized.
Well, hey, no knocks of stick shifts. Come on. I'm a defender of that, man. My 2006 Mustang was fantastic. So anyway,
Ben, we heard from Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. It was a banner week this week. Tim Walz at Harvard made some news, but not.
A real who's that of politics.
A real who's that of politics. But I want to play you the B side of the hit single cut that Tim Walz said. Here's what else he had to say. Let's play cut number 15.
And I think after the fact, it is not second guessing or anything. I think it's fair to go back on and look at this. Look, we had the most qualified person who'd run for president in this country's history at the top of the ticket. That in itself should have got this thing done.
Stop.
Whoa. Oh, Tim. I mean, does he need somebody to check on him? Just mentally.
You know that animated.
Man can drive.
You know that animated GIF. You know that animated GIF of Barack Obama shrugging his shoulders with his hands up, looking around like.
Yes, that's one of my favorites. No, not great, Bob. This is not good, Tim. This is. I mean, come on. Look, I understand that Tim has to spin for his team and everything involved with that, but the most qualified person who's ever run for president. Not even Kamala Harris believes that.
No,
I'm sorry, she doesn't. That's absolutely bonkers.
She didn't complete.
I can't believe I missed this aspect to his remarks. It's so crazy.
She didn't complete her. She was attorney general. She never completed her second term because she went into the Senate. She never completed her one term as senator to run for president and fail miserably. And then when she was finally picked as VP, what did she do exactly? I mean, what was her portfolio?
I'm just trying to think. You could actually even argue that she's one of the least qualified losers of a presidential election. Meaning that, that if you look back, Hillary Clinton, more qualified, definitely more qualified. Al Gore, more qualified. John Kerry, more qualified. John McCain, more qualified. Certainly Bob Dole, more qualified. The point is that people who ran for president before, who ran for president the second time, the list is extremely long of some of the greatest heroes in American history. I mean, he is dissing all of those people when he says that.
I know.
Including people
glorious.
of his own party. And it's what is so Tim, you think Hillary Clinton is chopped liver? I mean, she was Secretary of State. Just on forget ideology. He's actually he's so dumb that he's actually dissing some of the most qualified people in his own party who ran for president and war heroes like John McCain and Bob Dole. And it's Tim, man,
it's
you're
glorious.
Just not good at this political thing.
It's just glorious, and of course, his the person who was the coming messiah of the Democratic Party, Kamala Harris. Again, I'm not going to play you the A cut or the single. I'm going to play you the B side from her Emerge speech, cut number 2.
I'm telling you, Dwayne. I actually now that I've heard this, which is the first time I'm hearing it, I will write. I have to write about this. This is amazing. Everybody needs to know that he said this. This is so stupid.
It's spelled Duane. Just so you know. Let's play cut 2.
And folks, what we are experiencing right now is exactly what they envisioned for America. Right now, we are living in their vision for America.
Oh.
And you know what? I'm okay with that, Ben.
Well, she had to say it twice because she's Kamala Harris. Did you repeat yourself over and over again?
Did you see CBS? Did you see CBS News? What they said about her today?
No, I did not.
Quote: sources familiar with Harris's thinking, which I don't know what that source is. Sources familiar with Harris's thinking say she's weighing a gubernatorial bid in her home state, a third run for the presidency, or not seeking elected office at all. Now, That was her options on November 5th at about 10:30.
Yeah, and I think that those options haven't really changed. That.
No, it's not breaking news.
I think she will try to run it back with the gubernatorial bid only because California is such a blue state that she's certain of being one of the two people who get into the final situation there, and that's something that I think she understands as being her only path back to relevance. But look, it's not going to make her a better politician. I don't think that she has that bone in her body. I don't think that she has that genetic DNA that you need to be a really good politician and connect with people on a human level in ways that she never proved capable of doing when she was running for president. I don't think that $1 billion couldn't make her president, and she's not going to be somebody who I think they ever run back again and invest that kind of support in, because they know what that story looks like and how it ends. And it's going to end that way if she's running against J.D. Vance or if she's running against some other Republican come 4 years from now.
Last story with a minute left, and I haven't covered it at all today, so I wanted to cover it with you. How far has Pierre Poilievre's stock fallen when he was the heir apparent? It was a mortal lock. Not only did the Conservatives lose the election, he lost his own seat. He announced today that his party basically kicked to the curb the neighboring districts or the neighboring provinces conservative who did win, who's now resigning, so Poilievre can run for a special election in his seat to try to clamber back into power to at least lead the Conservatives again.
Look, there's a contrast here, which is to say, if you take a look at Doug Ford, obviously the brother, who is somebody who had a different approach when it came to representing himself versus America, balancing against Trump. I think that you could have had a situation where that was something that Pierre adopted. Trump wouldn't have liked it, but I think Canada would have. Instead, you have more dominance from the Canadian boomers who have been voting for these ridiculous liberal leftist politicians for generations and now are just sticking it to the youngs. If you look at the dynamic in Canada, young voters are overwhelmingly conservative. They want change. They hate the immigration policies. They want change to the tax policies. They want lower housing prices. It's the old screwing over the youngs. And there will be eventually a reckoning that puts somebody in power, but I doubt that it's going to be Pierre.
I think you're absolutely right. Ben Domenech, read everything he writes over at The Spectator, which is a wonderful publication. You can catch his podcast. You can see him on Fox News all the time or on X at bdomenech. Ben, thank you very much. As always, we'll talk to you next week. When we come back from the break, I'm going to fill you in on just a couple of the other stories that are percolating around the news that you may not have heard about. And it'll make you shake your head because you'll be thinking, well, this just seems to make so much sense until you hear the rest of the story, and it'll surprise you. Wayne Patterson in for Hugh Hewitt. Today, he is down in Georgia. He kept thinking he was in South Carolina. And was distressed to learn that Georgia is actually not indeed South Carolina. If you listened to the show yesterday, it was kind of funny. Anyway, he's not the only one traveling around. Bernie Sanders is still out on his oligarchy tour. And, of course, he's going on his oligarchy tour stop to stop by way of private jet. And you know, of course, who populates most of the people that use private jets to go around. That would be the oligarchs. But anyway, here is what Bernie Sanders had to say yesterday, cut number 16.
I'm not going to tell you that the struggle in front of us is easy. The oligarchs own the economy. They own the media. They own the political process. That's the reality.
It's just not May Day. Unless you have Bernie Sanders doing an oligarch speech. The problem with Bernie Sanders talking about oligarchy is it's not exactly a new message. It's not a new message from Bernie Sanders. It's not a new message from Bernie Sanders a year ago, from 2 years ago, from 5 years ago. In fact, here is Bernie Sanders oligarching his way through history. Cut number 17.
This great country of ours is moving very rapidly
That's
in the
1993.
direction
of oligarchy. The United States of America
That's
today
94.
is increasingly becoming an oligarchy. More and more
95,
moving
when I actually got
toward
into
an
radio.
oligarchy. We are moving in the direction of oligarchy. We will move
07.
even more rapidly in the
2012.
direction of an oligarchy. This great country
2014.
is evolving into an oligarchic society. It is called oligarchy,
2015.
and that is the system we are rapidly moving toward. This is a budget that moves our country
2017.
rapidly into the direction of oligarchy. A handful
2018.
of billionaires are moving this entire planet toward an oligarchic society.
Start off with the bad news,
And
which is
last
pretty
week.
bad, and that is that under Donald Trump, this country is hurtling rapidly toward oligarchy.
Now, in that little grid, if you were watching the Salem News Channel, of all the different Bernies over the years, going back, what is it, 30, 32 years now, he's been warning about the oligarchies. All but, I think, 10 of those cuts were during years where either Bill Clinton was in office or Barack Obama was in office. And we were oligarchies in, apparently, too. So the fact he's trying to make this about Trump now, it doesn't work too well. Another kind of fun moment, Becca Balint, in a House hearing, Vermont Congresswoman, said this, cut number 1.
Morning of Thursday, April 24th, about 20 armed federal agents broke into a home occupied by a family of U.S. citizens in Oklahoma City who had just moved there 2 weeks prior from Maryland.
She goes
ICE
on for a
agents
minute and a
mistaken-
half complaining about how the goon squad is out there arresting Americans and deporting them and doing all sorts of things. And wake the hell up, she says at the end. Go after the real criminals, she says. Kosh Patel announced in Charlotte, North Carolina today, somebody who kidnapped a young mother and her baby in North Carolina, happened to be here illegally, previously deported. The feds got him and arrested him, and they're going after the bad guys. Mission accomplished. I'm joined by Garrity the Indispensable, Jim Garrity, the senior political correspondent over at National Review. Writes columns at the Washington Post, has the 3 Martini Lunch, does the Morning Jolt, all sorts of great content over at National Review. Jim, welcome back. Great to talk to you.
Dwayne, it is great to be back, and I can't tell you how absolutely thrilled I am that when I return to the program after a long absence, I'm just thrilled that it's you and not you, because I knew we were going to hear the Browns had the greatest draft of all time. By the way, they really did have a good draft, but don't tell Hugh I said that. Don't let him know. As far as I'm concerned, I'm sure he'd be talking about Shedeur Sanders is already getting set for the gold jacket. I'll let him enjoy that one. I'll let him feel good about it. But no, you're not going to talk about actual news.
I was not going to even touch sports. It was not even in my frontal lobe until you just brought it up. But now that you brought it up, I have to note for the record that under the pontificate of Pope Francis, when he, from 2012 till earlier this year, or a few weeks ago, all 4 professional leagues, Major League Baseball, National Hockey League, National Football League, National Basketball Association, all 4 leagues, every team in every league has appeared in at least one postseason game, except for one team. Jim Garrity, do you know who that might be?
Of course, it's the New York Jets, and honestly, Dwayne, I felt that Pope Francis was the weak link the whole time.
I see. This is why you've always hated the Pope.
Well, there's that, I always felt like he favored the Cardinals. That just seemed like his natural.
Yes.
Obviously, in baseball, he preferred the Padres, but you look at that. California Angels might be the other one that he'd be a big fan of.
I'm sure he liked the New Orleans Saints. I'm sure he liked the Saints a lot.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get to the.
They wanted to see Mel Kiper Jr. and that kind of style of really in-depth coverage for the conclave. So I tried to do Mel Kiper Jr. This guy, he's a Cardinal, but this guy brings it every single play. He plays through the whistle, trying to do a Mel Kiper doing it and saying, this guy is going to be a Cardinal. And somebody saying, Mel, they're all Cardinals.
That's pretty funny. Let's get to the kind of serious stuff, and then we'll we'll end with the fun stuff again. New York Magazine. This is kind of fun to me, just because it's just rank hypocrisy on the left, and it's glorious to behold. When John Fetterman was running for Senate, I seem to recall when people and voices on the right were questioning his fitness for office because he couldn't talk. He was still suffering from the adverse effects of a stroke, and he couldn't think, he couldn't form sentences. You'd think that might be something a senator might need to be able to do, but the New Yorker was right there on the spot saying that was out of bounds. Those kind of questions could not be asked. He's just fine. Don't worry about it. Well, we're supposed to worry about it this morning, says the New Yorker, Jim Garrity.
Yeah, no, it was New York Magazine, not the New Yorker.
I'm sorry. New York Magazine, yes.
But yeah, no, I was really irked by that. And I'll remind listeners that it was a week before that infamous debate back in 2022 that basically said that he had no issues. That the letter from the doctor said he was making a full recovery and everything was fine. And then we watched him on the debate stage, and he had great difficulty talking. And all of us were like, what gives? And first of all, I think that discredits any letter from a doctor saying, don't worry, this candidate or this office holder is doing just fine. Now, all of us have seen Fetterman making more and more public appearances over the last 3 years. I had a chance to talk to him very briefly in the Fox News green room, I think towards the end of last year. If he's not 100%, he certainly seemed like he was getting better and better over time, speaking more clearly. And now New York Magazine says his staff is he's doing much worse than it seems, that he and the staff is deeply worried about him. Now, there's some stuff in this article that do sound like reasons for concern if he's indeed not taking his medication as his doctors have instructed. If apparently he was in some sort of car accident last year. Look, sometimes people have a tough time recovering from a stroke, and sometimes things take a while. But I can't help but notice that in between 2022 and now, John Fetterman is quite a few conservatives' favorite Democratic senator. He's not a full-fledged conservative, but he basically is really good on Israel. He really enjoyed kicking around Bob Menendez and his corruption every opportunity he got. And he was pretty good on immigration. He said it was not xenophobic to be worried about the sheer number of people coming across the border. And
as a conservative, he's a pleasant surprise. He's at least somebody that you can reason with on certain issues, which you can't say about a lot of Democrats these days.
And if I remember correctly, even though he didn't necessarily vote for many members of the Trump cabinet, he met with a bunch of them, which was more than a whole bunch of other Democratic senators were willing to do. So here's the thing. So the message from back then, when from everything we could see, was that he was in much rougher shape. Then the New York Magazine and a whole bunch of other folks in mainstream media were saying, no, don't worry, it's fine. Now when he starts saying things that irritate progressives, now they're saying he's really in trouble and maybe he should not be in office, which seems exactly the reverse of what it ought to be.
It sure does.
Like a hit piece.
Yeah, and who's coming up with the hit piece? My spidey sense tells me that this hit piece is being originated by Giselle. I think that's where this is coming from.
Well, that was the other very curious detail in that article, and I got to give credit where it's done. Like, they did some deep reporting in this. She is apparently not happy about the changes in his overall political philosophy since he took office. And we rarely get to hear that. I don't know how many Democratic, or I don't know how many senators' wives disagree with what their husband or wife or husbands think their wife is doing, but that was very revealing. And I don't know about you, Dwayne, I think you had a chance to meet Mrs. Garrity. When we disagree, I do not advertise that to the world. You're not going to see
absolutely
me
not.
To a reporter.
It's off limits. That's off limits.
Not really. That does not a particularly good look on her as well.
Yeah, absolutely right. So very quickly, Trump pulls PBS funding. Jake Tapper says, I learned how to read by watching Sesame Street. Jim Garrity, very quickly. Trump's going to win this battle, isn't he?
It is. It's a huge deal to Generation Xers. My kids learned PBS, Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, 321, all that stuff is a big deal to us. Is not a big deal to kids from the past generation. So.
That's Absolutely right. Jim Garrity of National Review and the Washington Post, thank you very much. Dwayne Patterson in for just a couple of more minutes before Hugh takes over the air and TV wavelengths with a new edition of the Hillsdale Dialogue with Dr. Matthew Spalding. But I'm joined by the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show because it is time for the week's verse. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Dwayne. You know, since you and Mr. Garrity were talking about politics and wives, the tantalizing Tarzana Johanna says I have a problem, and is that I refuse to let go of certain things. And I know the White House Correspondents' Dinner was last weekend, but I just can't let go.
Okay.
When I was young, a maxim to which we all adhered was that in our endeavors the truth should be revered. Whether dark and hidden or plain for all to see, there was an understanding that the truth would set you free. Today we curse the darkness and fear to light the candle, for those in charge think that the truth is something you can't handle. The media around us is full of falsehoods solely, for like the ancient saying goes, truth puts its boots on slowly. They give each other grand awards, the tool of last resort, for hinting at a story that they didn't quite report. They had too much compassion. They showed too much respect. Nonpartisan reporting is just too much to expect. The most distressing lesson that I have ever had, sometimes the truth is painful, it's ugly, and it's sad. So those who want to change the world can't keep the curtain closed. To make a new and better place, the truth must be exposed. That, my friends in media, is your most pressing duty, for only then an ugly truth can be a thing of beauty. That's Don't Mention the Truth. I just did, but I think I got away with it, by Tarzana Joe.
I would pay cash money to have you up there to do an ode at the people attending Nerd Prom just once. I would pay cash money to see that. Is this up at... I haven't been invited, probably won't be invited, but boy, wouldn't that be kind of fun.
Dinner.
Is this already up at tarzanajoe.com?
It is indeed. It is indeed.
As is I want a poem button in case people want to in case people want to hire Joe for verse. Is business still recession proof? Is business still tariff proof at this point?
An interesting phenomenon this week. Every time I sent out a poem and I had that sigh of relief, a new request came in. So it's a good week. Good week.
Well, you can get a hold of Joe at tarzanajoe@reagan.com or simply go to tarzanajoe.com, click on that I Want a Poem button, and he's not that expensive. He should raise his rates. Hasn't yet. But boy, does he write really good stuff. Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it.